Hey everyone, we're going to go over these 2.6 notes graphing slope-intercept form. Before we started with graphing slope-intercept form, we looked at just identifying a few key features of linear functions. Those are slope, x-intercept, or 0, and y-intercept. Okay, so if you want to write some extra things down, you can write some reminders to yourself. Slope is rise over run. You might also want to write that an x-intercept is the same thing as a 0. Okay, and an x-intercept is like a y-intercept. It's just where the line crosses the x-axis instead of where the line crosses the y-axis. So you might want to write those definitions down as well. So there are some definitions for you. You might want to pause and copy those down so you have them. But we're going to look at example number 1. Remember to find slope, that is rise over run, using 2 points. So I have my points that are here, and I'm just going to count rise over run. I had a rise of -7 because I went down 7, and then a run of +4. I also noticed that my slope was negative from the beginning because it was decreasing from left to right. So my slope is -7/4. That cannot be simplified, so that is my slope. Now, when looking for the x and the y-intercept, I'm looking for the places where they cross the x and the y-axis. So right here, I've crossed the x-axis. So what that point is 4, 0, which means my x-intercept is 4. Also can be written as 4, 0. And my y-intercept is up here. Oops, let me just get a point on it. At 0, 7. So that is my point there for my y-intercept. Now this just tells us some important information about the graph. It'll make a little bit more sense when we talk about them in real world, but for now, this is all we are looking to do. So go ahead and try number 2, and I will have the answers in just a second. So pause, try number 2. Okay. Should have finished it, and when you got your slope, you should have been able to simplify to an answer of 3 for your slope. You might have used points that were farther apart, so you might have gotten a rise of 6 and a run of 2, but when you divide 6 by 2, your rise over your run, that should get you the number 3. That should simplify to 3, so we should have gotten a positive slope of 3. That 0, it goes through the x-axis at -2, and it goes through the y-axis at a y value of 6, so that is why I have it there. Okay, again, it's just important to note it as a point because that is a point on the line. Now we're going to talk about graphing. From slope-intercept form, or y equals mx plus b, there are 2 things you need to graph from slope-intercept form. First, you need the slope, and then you need the y-intercept. Okay, you're actually going to start with your y-intercept and then use your slope to move, and we'll talk about that more in a second, but I just have a few examples for you so you can practice identifying the slopes. Quick review that your m is your slope. Okay, it's always in front of the x if you want to make a note of that. Slope is in front of the x. And then your b value is your y-intercept. And like I said, these are the 2 things you need to be able to graph, so it's important that we can look at an equation and identify them. So if we look at y equals 1/2 x minus 3, our slope is with x, so our slope is right here, 1/2. And that means this other value, this -3, we always take the sign in front, is our y-intercept. Okay, and I'm going to write that as a point, actually. 0, -3. This is just going to help me when I'm graphing, but I could also just say, okay, b is -3. I could write m equals 1/2. In fact, that's what I'm going to do on my next one over here. Example number 4 says f of x equals 10 minus 5x. Well, that doesn't look like y equals mx plus b. Well, remember, f of x is just another way of saying y, and it is mx plus b, but it's written in the opposite order. So slope is still with the x. So the value that I have with x is a -5. And the y-intercept, this 10 value right there, so b equals +10. Now, number 5 and 6 are a little bit different. If I look at 5, it says g of x, remember that's just another way to say y, equals 8. Well, there's no x here. There's no x. If there's no x, then what's my slope? 0 times x. My slope is 0. If it's a y equals equation, then I have a horizontal line at y equals 8, which means I also have a y-intercept of 8. We're not going to spend too much time with these vertical and horizontal lines, but it is important. If you see something that doesn't have an x in it, right? It doesn't have an x in the equation, that slope is 0. Example 6, if it just says x equals 5, well, if y equals something was a horizontal line, then maybe x equals is a vertical line. And if you think back to Mr. Slopeman, or if you look at that, we actually drew those features, an x and a y, in the Mr. Slopeman face, so you could see. And that means its slope is undefined. So if you have x equals, the slope is undefined, and when you have an undefined slope, you don't have a y-intercept. It's not going to cross, unless, of course, it's on the y-axis, but it's not. So you can kind of follow this pattern for 5 and 6. If it's y equals something, the slope is always going to be 0. It's always going to be a horizontal line, and whatever the y equals value is where the y-intercept will be. For x equals, the slope is always undefined because it's going to be a vertical line, and there's never going to be a y-intercept unless the equation is x equals 0, in which case it will be on the y axis. So now that we've identified, and example 3 and 4 are going to be the most important, let's start graphing. Let's take a look at example 7, y equals negative 2x plus 6. To graph, we need the y-intercept and the slope. It might be helpful to write over on the side that our slope moves and our y-intercept, or our b, is where we begin. This helps us remember that we always start with our y-intercept on the graph, and then we're going to use the m to move and get a new point from that y-intercept. So m, the slope will move us, and the y-intercept is where we will begin. So first things first, I need to identify my slope and my y-intercept. So my slope is next to my x, so it's negative 2. Ooh, I don't have a rise over run. In order to graph, I want to have a rise over run, so I know how much to rise and how much to run. To do that, I'm going to make it a fraction. So negative 2 as a fraction is just negative 2 over 1. You can put anything over 1 to make it a fraction. This tells me that I'm going to go down 2, because it's my rise, and it's negative, and I'm going to go to the right 1. Okay, it might be helpful for you to draw these arrows, especially as you're getting started. But remember, we're going to start with that y-intercept, and our y-intercept is 6 in this equation. So that's 6 on the y-axis. Or at that point, like we talked about earlier, 0, 6. So that's the first thing I need to do. X-intercept. What about that? I can't do anything with that yet. I don't have a graph yet. Okay, so I need to graph my line first. So at 6 on the y-axis, or at 0, 6, I'm going to put a point. Now from there, I'm going to use my slope of negative 2 over 1 to move and get us another point. So I'm going to go down 2 from 6 and over 1. When I get there, I'm going to make another point. If I want, I can go down 2 more and go 1 more over to the right. Just creating more of that line, but I only need 2 points to make a line. Likewise, I could also start at my y-intercept and go up 2 and to the left 1. Now my run is my negative movement because I went to the left. Notice that when I make a point, though, going up and to the left, it still fits on that lovely line. So you can really go either direction with those, okay, and then you'll just draw your line right here. Important, always have your arrows and make that line go all the way through the graph. Again, you only need 2 points. So I could have stopped after I had done this point, and we would have been good. Okay? So begin with my y-intercept, move with my slope. On example 8, my slope is 3/4. It's what is in front of the x, and my y-intercept is -6. So I'm going to begin with my b. I have a point at -6, and I'm going to move with my slope. This slope was 3/4 already in rise over run, so I'm going to go up 3 and to the right 4. So from my y-intercept, up 3, to the right 4. That is all I need. I can now draw my line through to connect these points, draw my arrows, and we are good. Oh wait, I forgot. Let's go and label our x-intercepts. Now that I have my points. So going back to example 7, we could have kept going arrows all the way down, or we can look and see where that line hits the y-intercept, or the x-intercept, excuse me. That's at a point 3, 0. So that's our x-intercept. So once you've graphed your line using your y-intercept and then moving with slope, you can find that x-intercept or 0 on the graph. You can either keep using rise over run to make your points, or use your line, as long as your line is straight, to tell what that y or that x-intercept value is. So for example 8, the 0 should be 8. At that point, 8, 0. You can see with my line, I was a little bit off, so I put a point there. But when I did my rise over run up 3 and then over 4, it got me to that point. Let's look at example number 9. Go ahead and try this one yourself. See if you can figure out what the slope is and what the y-intercept is, and then start to graph it, and then come back and check your work just by hitting play. Okay, so I left my y-intercept in orange for you, and then I used my slope, -1/5, to go down 1 from that y-intercept and over to the right 5, and I put that point in purple. Then I also went the opposite direction. I went up 1 and to the left 5, kind of going the opposite way of my arrows, and I was able to get another point going the other direction. I like that just to help me make my line. Right? Drew my line, had the arrows, and from there I was able to tell that my 0 was at 5, 0. My 0, remember, is the same thing as x-intercept. So the last thing that you should do, describe how to graph a function from slope-intercept form. Right, and I'll give you kind of a tip. Begin with b, and move with m. Begin with b, move with m. Use this to kind of further talk about, okay, well, what is the b value? What is the m value? What do they mean? What are you going to do with them? Let your teacher know if you have any questions.